Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today, you're in for a treat, Mr. Karl Sakas. I feel kind of bad. I had this dude on over 2 months ago. But man, with the backlog, even releasing 2 and 3 episodes a week, it took that long to get this published. But he is worth the wait. I actually got to listen to the entire episode again because it had been so long. And I have typed notes, but still, it's nothing like listening to it again. And this is just a smart dude. Talks about being a young kid and making sales, how he more than doubled his hourly rate in high school and college on doing some work. So you're going to like that story. But now he works with agencies and helps them grow. And he's very practical, very relevant. The things that you'll learn in this, you'll be able to apply right away. So I wish I could have got him published quicker, but hey, good things come to those who wait. Right. Today's kind of weird for me. I'm recording this intro in the evening. I'm about to leave for a little jiu-jitsu. I was running around. I spoke at an event this morning here in Southern California, then saw a friend of mine from Australia speaking at his event out towards Orange County. So, you get out of your routine. It just feels weird. The sun's bright. It's hot. And I know I've got 2 hours of inflicting pain on people. I'm hoping they don't inflict too much on me. But it's been an interesting journey. I've been doing this jiu-jitsu now for just over 4 months. And really felt like I had improved just yesterday. And I've been going on average at least 4 times a week. And they say, 2 to 3 times is recommended. And I went 6 times last week. I'll probably make it 6 times this week. So at least double the average that they recommend. And man, you get better, you get worse. But it's tough when you grow or you go through something with your peers. It's hard to recognize your own improvement because everybody is improving at about the same pace. So you feel like, hey, I'm not really seeing any growth. Then a new person comes along and you beat them. And you beat them pretty easily. And you realize, okay, maybe I am learning something. Or some people that used to beat you a lot maybe only beat you a little. Like there's this one guy, he's a blue belt now. And he got promoted recently. So he was a 4-stripe white belt when I started. And, he would whoop me 6, 7 times every time we rolled. And it'd be just a 6-minute sparring session. And so, yesterday I got the better of him for the most part. He still tapped me out twice. But I had a higher belt, a purple belt watching and gave some tips. And, they say that there is no failure in jiu-jitsu. You either win or you learn. And that is just so true because the 2 ways that this guy got me, once it was pointed out how I had left myself vulnerable, I now know how to fix that. But the only way that would have really sunk in is by me losing, right? By me failing that one time. And twice, actually. He got me on the same move, essentially the same move, both times. And because I was making a particular move that is to my benefit, because I'm bigger than this guy, I'm probably 50 pounds heavier. And so I'm using my size to my advantage, but I missed one little thing, one small little positioning. And it left me exposed. And so while repetition is the key to learning, that's certainly true. There's a lot to be said for the impact, for the adrenaline, for the emotion of the event. And so, people like that, my parents' age, they remember where they were when JFK was shot. I remember where I was when the first space shuttle blew up. I remember where I was exactly when 9/11 happened. And of course, those events were not repeated. So why do we remember them so well? And it's because of the emotion, the adrenaline that gets created, pumping through our bodies. It makes it memorable. So these getting caught yesterday twice from the same move sunk in, and having somebody there right away to give feedback was so important. It would take me a year to figure out what was going on in that move when this person who has 6 or 7 years experience and watching, he picked it up immediately. And so who do you have on your side? Who do you have with that kind of experience in an area that you're weak or vulnerable, helping you see, find that blind spot? When I was taking golf lessons when I was 23, 24 years old, I remember I was still 23. It was right before I left for Korea, and it was the late summer, like August, September time frame, and of 1993. And I had this guy film me. I went to golf lessons, and he filmed me. And I think I swung the club 5 times, and we spent the rest of the time reviewing the film. He had 3 cameras, one from the front, one from behind, one on top of me. And we could look at the positioning of my head, of my arms, of my wrists, where were my feet, where were my hips. I could just see everything. And so me being able to see myself because of the video was so important, so valuable. But are you willing to be vulnerable, to lay yourself out there, to have somebody review and critique you to make you better? If you are, then you're going to be great. And I don't use that word lightly. I was still single when I was starting golf, but starting when you're 23 years old, it's kind of late. Usually you're learning it as a kid. But I would shoot in the high 70s on a pretty regular basis. Shot in the 80s all the time when I was always playing. And that was legit, not kicking the ball around, playing it as it lies, playing from the tips, right? And I'm getting after jiu-jitsu. I've gotten after sales and sales training and Infusionsoft and HubSpot. When I dig in, I get serious about it. But I'm willing to get help. I'm willing to get somebody, a pro from the outside looking in, to help me get better. But I admit, I'm one of the rare men that will stop and ask directions. I hate being lost. I don't have to prove I can figure it out. I want somebody to help me shortcut, get me to my destination. Okay? But are you willing to do that? If you are, right, if you're weak, if you are not as good as you could be in copywriting, in sales, in marketing, in systems, maybe you just need your butt kicked on getting after the things you need to do, and you're just not doing it. You're putting it off for some reason. Hit me up. I've got a 90-day private coaching program. I open it up to very few people. I've got one client who's coming up on the end of her 90 days, and she's going out of the country. Otherwise, she was going to renew. So she's not going to renew till the August, September timeframe when she gets back. So if you're interested in that, visit thesaleswhisperer.com. Shoot a contact us to me, and we'll set a time to talk to see if it's right for you. It's not cheap, but it's still affordable. And that's just one of the things. I don't talk about that very much, again, because it's very limited in who I take on. I don't do a lot of one-on-one stuff. It's not scalable, but I do like doing some of it. And just learning that lesson yesterday, it really just drove it home. And then getting an update from her, realized, hey, I'll talk about that for a little bit to see who I might be able to help. So if you're willing to be open, if you're willing to be evaluated, if you can take feedback and coaching, because it's 90 days and there's no refunds. You get in and you work and you grow. And hey, it's like jiu-jitsu. If I could show you the bruises on my arm right now, you'd probably call the police, think my wife or kids are beating me. But it's worth the bruises and the aches and pains for me to get better. And so if you can handle the emotional aches and pains, then that's probably a good deal for you. So go check that out, thesaleswhisperer.com. Then just hit the contact us and shoot me a note from there. All right. So now let's bring on our guest, Karl Sakas. Karl Sakas, president of Sakas & Company, author of the ebook, Don't Just Make the Logo Bigger. All the way from Raleigh, North Carolina, man. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
Wes, great to be here.
So you're not too much of a basketball fan, so we'll leave the sports for later. But I love the background and the information that Melissa had sent me. I love the idea of downselling. I love the title of that ebook, Don't Just Make the Logo Bigger. But before we dive down into that rabbit hole, would you take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get our hands dirty?
Absolutely. I'm a business consultant to digital marketing agencies, and I help clients use process to overcome human nature. Based in Raleigh, North Carolina, I've worked with clients in 26 countries on 6 continents.
So process to overcome human nature. I think I like that.
Yeah.
Are you saying human nature is driven by entropy, and we just all tend towards disorder and chaos?
That can happen. In my experience, especially when you're running a business or you're juggling a lot of responsibilities, it's easy to focus on things that are urgent but not necessarily important. And suddenly the day gets away from you. And if you have lots of those days together, suddenly it's weeks and months and years. And you wake up and you're like, where am I?
Right. So did you start out as a digital agency, or have you always been consulting with digital agencies?
I've been in the industry for a long time. I started by learning HTML back in high school. This is in the mid to late 90s, doing websites in the days of dial-up and IE3. And fast forward more recently, served as project manager, director of operations for a couple digital agencies as the right-hand person to the owners, and decided to put that together 4 years ago to launch my agency consulting business.
Very cool. So what made you decide to go into agency consulting versus becoming an agency on your own? And I guess in a way you are an agency, right? You're just an agency for agencies.
I am. So I'm ultimately doing the consulting and coaching. I have several freelancers who help with my marketing and admin responsibilities and things like that. So, certainly in the role that agencies are advising their clients, I'm doing the same thing there. I think for me, the focus on the business side of things was really appealing. Increasingly, agencies are thinking like business consultants. It's a way to charge their clients more money. Ultimately, though, for me, the idea of focusing on business from the beginning really appealed to me around operations, strategy, and leadership.
So you were an operations guy, though, until you launched out on your own, right?
My focus was operations. I was doing strategy work for some clients, but I definitely come at things from an operations perspective. How do we take the long-term goal and then turn it into reality?
So how did you make that shift from operations to, hey, now I have my own business, I got to do sales and marketing and operations? I mean, that's a big leap for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, and certainly when you run your own business, you eat what you kill. So if you don't make the sales, even if you don't see yourself as a salesperson, you better be selling. I think for me, it helped that I had some good role models. I'm a 4th-generation entrepreneur. I grew up helping in my family's small business. One of my grandfathers was a business professor for 40-some years. And so business just seemed normal to me. I grew up helping family's business was rental property management. In elementary school, I was helping clean out during tenant turnovers. Now, should I have been cleaning up broken glass in the backyard of a townhouse at 5 or 6 or 7 years old? Maybe not. But my as my parents said, it built character.
Made you tough.
Exactly. And I was seeing what they were doing in terms of negotiating with new tenants, providing client service to the existing residents, negotiating with vendors, sorting things out when things didn't go as planned. I mean, that's a lot of business.
Right. But you didn't go right into that on your own. Was it a conscious effort? Were you subconsciously saying, oh, I'm not going to do what the family did? Or, how'd that come about?
I ran the web design and tech consulting business in high school and college, built that up to a couple dozen clients, all on a referral and word of mouth basis. But after college, I studied business, operations, and information systems. And, I had this idea that, I should go out and get a real job. At the time, I think I had the sense that, I was doing the freelancing thing while I was in school, but, now it's time to go out and work for a real company. And I did. I got a job in New York working for a social and environmental mutual fund company. I started as a sales and marketing analyst. Then I did client service for large clients, people who had invested $1 million or more with us, and then ultimately did investment research, making buy-sell recommendations for our North American fund, which was about $1.5 billion at the time.
So was there not an opportunity to work in the family business, or did you want to go out and see what else was out in the world?
I wanted to go out and see what was out there. I figured, kind of do my own thing, see how it would go. Right.
And so you said you've been on your own now for 4 years?
That is correct.
Cool. So, I want to keep this broad for our listeners. But I'm curious in what you do specifically for agencies. And I think for our listeners, what you would do for an agency, I'm guessing is 90% the same that you would do for any business, because an agency is a small business, and some may even be large. So, what are some of the common mistakes or things you help your agency clients fix or overcome or improve?
A big one that I help on is around managing growth. People typically reach out to me when they've been growing fast and now they're having growing pains. That might be anywhere from growing 30% a year to 100% a year, doubling every year or more. I had a call recently with an agency owner that had grown from 2 to 50 people in 3 years.
Wow.
Another one, even crazier, had grown from 2 to 20-some people in 3 months.
Wow. Like employees.
Yes.
Wow.
They had all the business coming in, and they're like, well, we got to staff it. Let's hire people. And the problem with that is you're focusing on the short-term pain, which is we better hire someone. But long-term, that isn't always a good idea. Right. Typically business owners tend to lean toward either running a lifestyle business, that is to fund their other activities, make a good income and run a profitable business, lifestyle at one end, and then high growth at the other, grow quickly and typically for an exit in mind. And the problem is when you run the business in a way that's not in line with your values, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, I think back, it's like I'm still lean, and I know I like to have fun, but man, when there's work to do, I work. And I don't get along well with people that don't understand, hey, it's the bottom of the ninth. We got 2 outs, everybody needs to focus, whether we're on offense or defense, right? Both teams need to focus. And get it done, right? Finish the game or extend the game. And, I see people with I just let a kid go. He, I couldn't reach him. And he's not full-time with me, but he's been with me on and off for 7 years. And I give him a lot of business. And we had a project we were working on, and I couldn't reach him. Right. And I find out on his Instagram that, he's at Knott's Berry Farm with his new girlfriend.
Oh.
And, I'm like, maybe you shouldn't post that when I'm looking for you, because we live in Southern California. Communication, cell towers are ubiquitous, right? They are omnipresent. Yep. So I know he was getting my texts and phone calls. And all I wanted was an update. All he had to say was, hey, I'm out the rest of the day. I'll catch up tonight. Okay. But, to just vanish when we're working on things, it just, I'm not very nice in those situations. So I'm better having like some liaison between me and everyone else.
But you know yourself. I mean, the model I use with agency owners around hiring employees is this idea of new rope versus wet twine. The idea is that new rope is strong. You can rely on it. Those are the employees who take initiative, who bring you solutions instead of problems, who go above and beyond, who don't go to Knott's Berry Farm when they're on deadline and not tell you about it.
Yep.
In contrast, wet twine employees, wet twine is weak. It's going to break. Those are the employees that tend to create drama.
Yep.
Those are the ones who require way too many follow-ups. And ultimately, if you have too many wet twine employees, you're not going to meet your goals.
Right. So what was the first thing you did when you went out on your own?
I started by recruiting my then boss to become my first client.
Oh, how'd you do that?
I gave her a 2-page proposal, and the proposal was bullets about how she benefited from doing this. And ultimately, only one bullet, the one at the very end, was about how I would benefit, which is I wanted to start my agency consulting business, and this would free up more time to do it. Ultimately, her only question, it must have been a very convincing proposal, because her only question was, okay, when do you want to do this?
Now, did you tell her you were leaving, or was this like, hey, here's my 2-week notice, and by the way, I want you to pay me when I leave?
It was open-ended. So I said, here's what I am planning to do. I'll work with you on timeline.
So, I mean, did she know you wanted to go out on your own? Some might get offended or hurt that you're leaving. Because of the way she had acted with other employees before, I wasn't worried about that. I mean, I think that's a common issue. But her approach was if people weren't a good fit or if they wanted something different, let her know, and then she would actually help people find new jobs. I had a coworker who'd worked there previously who was working at the agency and realized she really wanted an in-house role. She didn't like the idea of multiple clients, and my boss helped her find a new job. Right.
So I figured it would go smoothly, but there's always the unknown.
So she becomes your first client, but I'm going to take a guess that it didn't replace all of your income.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But the goal was to cover basic living expenses, so then I'd have more time, because I went from officially full time 40 hours a week, but it was more like 50 to 60. Down to 10 hours a week. And so suddenly I had all of this free time, which of course running a business quickly gets eaten up. But I was focusing on things like getting the word out about my new business. It helped that my network was primarily people working in marketing. So not everyone was at agencies, though many were, or they knew people who were. Updated my new website. And one of the first things I started doing from a website perspective was I was spending a little bit of time trying to sort out, what's the right way to start the site?
Right.
I think it was almost a downside of having been a web designer earlier in my career, because I knew what was possible.
Right.
And that was almost a little paralyzing. And I spoke with someone else to get some perspective, and they said, well, all you need is 2 things: homepage with contact info and a blog. The idea is people can get in touch with you, and then the blog is so you're constantly putting out content that's useful to people, and Google is indexing it, and that all adds up. So that's what I did. And since then, I have averaged 6 blog posts a month for the past 4 years.
Cool.
Yeah. And
where do you get your inspiration?
A lot of it is questions I get from clients and prospective clients. Around, this situation came up, what do I do? I'll create a more generic version, and of course anonymize it for the blog post, but it's great. I mean, it's almost like being an advice columnist in some ways. People just keep sending you questions.
Ask Karl.
Exactly, yeah.
So are they like what you'd call epic posts, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 words? Are they shorter?
It varies. The shortest will be 300 to 500, and then a lot of them will be 1,000. Some will be longer. I do have some epic posts. I have one on advice if you're thinking of starting a marketing agency. Here's what to know if you're getting started. I had one on travel tips based on thousands of hours of business travel. So ultimately the goal is to figure out what do people want to know, and then that helps drive the length.
Right. So in a nutshell, what do agencies need to know? I mean, why does one company grow from 2 to 52 or 2 to 20 while others struggle?
3 things. One would be using process to overcome human nature. We talked about that a bit before. I think a lot of people run into situations where they're like, whoa, I didn't expect this. I don't know what to do. Maybe it's an employee resigns. Maybe it's your client says they're thinking of firing you. Maybe you're having a sales conversation with someone and they bring something up. The reality is you can plan for a lot of that. Say in a sales conversation, you may get an objection about price. Don't be surprised. You have some things to deal with that. Or if an employee resigns, well, everyone is going to resign or get fired eventually. So that shouldn't be a surprise. So when you've got process, checklists, things like that, and I share a lot of templates with clients around, for instance, if they're having a difficult client, to help them decide what to do next. So if you try to reinvent the wheel every time, that's going to make life a lot harder. So ultimately, key point, use process to overcome human nature. Okay. Next one is...
So in other words, they don't do that, and that's why they struggle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. If you're trying to make it up every time, that's exhausting.
Right.
And you'll never get yourself, if you're running a business, you'll never get yourself out of the business. And if you're an individual salesperson, you are running your own business from a quota perspective. If you're doing everything, you're trapped.
Right.
I talk about the idea of making yourself needed but not necessary.
Right. Cool.
Finding ways to step away. The next thing that I see that people don't do that they should is when they're working with someone else, focus on what's in it for them. Okay. People tend to focus on what's in it for me. And the challenge is, if you're talking all about yourself, your prospect doesn't care. Your employee doesn't care. They're thinking, how does this impact me? Right. How do I get promoted? How do I get a bonus? How do I do whatever my goal is? If you can position what you're doing or what you're asking them to do in a way that focuses on what's in it for them, well, why wouldn't they say yes? It's helping them.
In other words, they're not good salespeople. They should enroll in the Make Every Sale course, makeeverysale.com. Hey, but I digress. Please continue.
and the final thing is to think long term. The challenge is that when you're in a difficult situation and, maybe you're just getting started, or maybe you've had a bad quarter or a bad year, you feel like you need to say yes to everything, even when there are red flags, those red flag opportunities. And ultimately, the key there is to focus on the long term and figure out how to get through it. One analogy that one of my clients mentioned was the idea of the pile of crack. I was having a discussion with the client, and she talked about how, the previous week sales had been up and inquiries were up, and then this week sales and opportunities were down. And said, but I know next week it's probably going to be fine again, but it's like this roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And I said, it sounds like you're describing an addiction. And she said, yeah, well, it's like having a pile of crack. And I said, well, what do you mean? I was trying to imagine how this
works. Does crack
work.
come in piles? I didn't know it came in piles.
I had to do some follow up looking on Wikipedia, and I guess technically it's a pile, but that's not the usual approach there. And I said, pile of crack, what do you mean? She said, well, if you've got a big pile of crack in front of you, you're feeling good. You're feeling confident about the future. When you have a small pile of crack, though, then you start feeling desperate. You start making bad decisions.
Well, my dad always says, if you think you're desperate, you are.
There we go. So the stronger you can keep your pipeline, the better decisions you're going to make because you're not feeling that pressure.
Well, I mean, it sounds good, right? Hey, think long term. Yeah, we all should think long term, right? We should all floss more, eat less red meat, exercise more often. But, you're launching a business, you got chaos, you have all these grandiose plans, and then Like today, we realized people couldn't log into the training module. There was a conflict in the code, and the welcome video would not play, right? So new client emails says, I feel like an idiot. Here's a screenshot. Where do I go? Or like that button right there. Oh, yeah, it doesn't play. So guess what? The plans we had for today were sidelined. Now, fortunately, it was a small issue. Bob, my partner, super smart, took him 15 minutes. He figured it out. But, he and I were having a planning call to talk about long-term when that email came in. So I'm like, long-term planning set aside, get the current brand new client his stuff that he paid for.
Yep.
So how do you make that time? How do you make that time to do the long-term planning? I call it, you gotta eat the rabbits while you're hunting the elephant, right?
There we go.
How? I mean, it's easier said than done.
For sure. When, the site is down and services aren't working, you've got to fix that.
Yeah.
If you're in a circumstance where that's happening every day or every week, that's tough, and you want to figure, well, what's the underlying reason for it happening? It sounds like here was just kind of a one-off blip.
Yeah.
But the reality is something is going to come up every single week and every single day. If you're in the circumstance where you're running the business and you're not the only person, the more you can do to make yourself needed but not necessary. That is, delegate client contact so you are not the first contact every single time.
Yeah.
You want clients to be able to escalate to you, but if you're taking every single call, you'll end up in a situation like one of my clients who said that she dreaded the phone ringing because it was someone with some sort of a problem. One of my solutions with her was to transition to hire 2 additional team members over time, 1 full-time, one as a contractor part-time, to handle that. Right. So she's still working with clients, but now it's to the point where more often she gets brought in to help as needed rather than being the one to get the first call.
So these agencies, are they typically hiring local people? Are they virtual? Is it a mix?
It varies. Some focus locally, others virtually, some a mix. Typically, they're between 10 and 100 people. I've helped clients anywhere from people getting started to about 600, 700, most, though, 10 to 100. Typically, they're looking for people locally, which means if you're in a large metropolitan area, that's great for finding people, but you also better keep them happy because they can jump somewhere else.
Right.
I also have some clients who are in more remote locations, clients in towns of 10 or 20,000 people. And in that case, you may be hiring locally, although as a client in a small town in Kentucky said, it's the same people applying for every job.
Right.
And for them, one of the secrets I recommended was, I said, who's the largest employer in town? And I already knew the answer. That was the hospital, the medical center nearby. And I said, do you have a contact in the HR department there? And they said, no, but like we don't want healthcare people. We want marketing and design people. And I said, yes. People are getting transferred to the hospital from elsewhere in the country every year. Some of them are bringing husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends with them who didn't really want to move here, but they may have marketing and design skills that they'd love to use and that you would love to get. Make that connection so when a new doctor, new nurse, new someone else is coming in and they've got a trailing spouse, trailing partner that would be a good fit for you, make sure that your agency is the first person they call.
Very cool. Very smart. So do these agencies, so some grow really fast, right? But others, do you only work with high flyers, or do you work, with just the steady eddies and just help them, create predictable growth? Or, because believe it or not, some people, they don't want to grow from 2 to 52. They're probably happy with 5 or 8 or 10, right? And they just want to have consistent business.
Exactly. And I don't recommend growing from 2 to 52 in 3 years. Yeah. I have a lot of clients who are on the lifestyle side of things where they want to grow, but a lot of it is, well, how can we do more with the people we've got. I have one client in the Bay Area who has said he does not want to grow beyond 12 people.
Right.
And the reason is for him that matches his management preferences, but that also means he can focus on being as productive and profitable as possible rather than adding more and more headcount, which then means you need to add more revenue to cover that if you're a high growth agency.
So at that point, I mean, do they literally just say no to business, or do you have them raise their prices so business kind of sorts itself out?
In his case, he has used that to raise prices for him and his partner. It is worth looking at what your close rate is. And everyone has a different sales process.
I'm the sales whisperer, baby. I'm 125%. People send me money before they even know my name. It's just I make it happen.
Wow. Well, we'll need to talk a little bit more after this, or point me to the right episode to listen to. People will say, things are going great, or maybe, I'm not making too much money, but my close rate's 90%. I send a proposal and 90% of the time they close. And I'll say, well, my advice is, well, it sounds like you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
If you're closing 90%, I mean, imagine how much you could raise your price and, relatively. Yeah. I recommend focusing on a close rate of around 60%. If it's less than half, you're probably not doing a good job of conveying to your prospective clients why you. But if it's 90%, you're probably not charging enough.
Right. Yep. Very good point. All right. Couple of new questions I started throwing in here. You're one of my early guinea pigs of slightly new process, although I wanted to hear some of your story. And we're going to wrap up with the downselling thing. So we cannot get off this call without discussing downselling. But what was the biggest sale you ever made?
The biggest sale I ever made was actually one on a relative basis, was one that I made in high school. Ah. So as I mentioned, I was a web designer. I was also a technology consultant. So I would do training and troubleshooting for individuals, small businesses, nonprofits. And I grew up outside Washington, D.C., grew up in Northern Virginia. And in high school, I had been the online editor for the high school newspaper. So I was taking our newspaper and putting it on the web. This was back in, like 1999, 2000 or so. And I got this sales call asking if I could come in to this trade association in D.C. and teach them desktop publishing. They just gotten a copy of Adobe PageMaker, InDesign now. And they're like, can you teach us how to do this? And I was thinking, I haven't used PageMaker in several years. I don't know if I remember. And they were like, how? And they were also saying, how much would you charge for that? And I was thinking, I have to remember what it was. And at the time, I was charging $35 an hour, which as a college student, that's pretty good as a contractor. And I said, well, you know what? I'd like to see how you're doing things now, see what your setup is. And then I can give you a quote based on that. Of course, what I really was thinking is, let me go in and see if I remember enough about what I did before. So I took the metro into D.C., met with them, and they explained what they were trying to accomplish. And I was like, okay, this is totally in line with what I know how to do. And remember, I had been charging $35 an hour. And they said, okay, what would you charge for this? And I said $75 an hour. And they said, okay, when can we start? And I was like, I should have asked for more.
And there's that 90% closing ratio.
Exactly. I ultimately worked with them for a couple summers while I was in school and, helped them improve things a lot from a process perspective.
Yeah. Now, again, if you were in the Make Every Sale course, I would have told you how to ask better questions up front and then give a price based on value. But hey, you were young, and that's pretty damn awesome, though. $75 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's over 100% increase in your hourly. And so how much did you work with them? Like several hours a week, like for months or a year or so, or what?
Worked with them for 2 summers, like 5 to 10 hours a week or so.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that all happened within, what, a matter of days?
I got the phone call and headed into D.C. the next day.
And you just quoted them, right? Did you just give them a verbal and then y'all just had to create some paperwork?
Yes, did the verbal. I don't remember if I used contracts then. I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd they find you?
I don't know. I think they had Googled me and they found my resume on my college website and it mentioned PageMaker skills and they saw, oh, you're nearby. I am still not totally sure how they ended up going with me, but it worked out for me. It worked out for them, and
you were on the Google in 1999.
I think it may have been Alta Vista at the time.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
old school, baby. Old school.
Yeah.
What's the biggest deal you ever lost?
I got an inquiry from an agency in L.A. that they were at $1 million a year in revenue at the time. They were primarily a PPC agency. And they said, we want to grow. We want to grow. They're at $1 million now. They said, we want to double in 8 months, and we want to quintuple in a year and a half. So they wanted to go from $1 to $5 million in a year and a half. And they also had a lot of money. They were sort of touching on things they were spending on other things. I was like, wow, this was pretty early in my work. And I was like, wow, this sounds really appealing, but I'm also thinking they have really unreasonable expectations. I mean, quintupling from $1 to $5 million in a year and a half. I don't think I can do that. I don't know if anyone can do that. And ultimately, I said, well,
isn't it easy? I mean, it's easier to grow when you're small, and if they have money. Now, I wouldn't guarantee it, right? But I mean,
yep.
It doesn't sound like how many people were in the company?
We didn't get into that. It was probably 8 to 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Ultimately, my conclusion was this wasn't going to be a good fit for me. And so based on that, I referred them to one of my competitors who does only new business development. Okay. And so, I'd say in that case, I lost it, but I chose to give it up.
Did you stay in touch with that guy? Were they able to reach those goals?
I know they grew. I had followed up to ask how it was going, and they're like, oh, yeah, we're growing. I do not think they hit that 5 million goal, or at least not that fast.
Yeah. But heck, in reality, if they got to 2 million or 3 million, that's a success.
Definitely. Well, it's, set big goals. You may not reach them, but at least you tried, and better off than having a, kind of a level or small goal.
Yeah. So what's in your library?
Well, certainly I have two of my own books, Made to Lead, which is a pocket guide to managing marketing and creative teams. I also have a book on using public speaking as a way to find new clients. It's called The In-Demand Marketing Agency. Very, very descriptive subtitle, How to Use Public Speaking to Become an Agency of Choice. But in terms of other things, most of my books are on Kindle. So I'm reading them electronically. It's great for travel, kind of thing. I read an interesting book recently. I was a history minor in college, a book called Charlatan, about this guy who's a quack doctor in the 1920s in the U.S. And he came up with this supposed medical treatment that involved transplanting goat testicles into humans.
Oh, I think I read that.
Yeah.
Did Dan Kennedy write that or mention it? Or
I'm not sure. But it was a case where, there was no medical basis for this at all, but he was charging people $750 per surgery. He was great at public relations. He actually bought and ran a radio station, one of the first commercial radio stations in the U.S. And, ultimately he drove enormous demand, of course, for a sham product. He also was doing patent medicine sales, so he had this radio-based show where people would call in and share their medical problems, and he would say, well, you should get the Brinkley Formula 43 and the 28. and that'll solve everything. And then everyone who was listening to the radio show who had similar problems went out and bought those too. I think it's a case of, marketing applied for the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. He eventually got run out of the state of Kansas, and he moved to Texas, where he ran a border blast radio stations. The transmitter was in Mexico. It wasn't under U.S. jurisdiction. Today a radio station might be 50,000 watts or maybe 100,000 watts. His radio station in the 20s and 30s, 1 million watts.
That's amazing.
You could hear him everywhere in the country. He also randomly decided to run for governor of Kansas on like a month's notice. He campaigned by plane. He was flying from place to place, one of the first people to campaign by plane. And if he hadn't been disqualified for certain reasons, he actually would have been elected governor.
And this was when? The 20s or 30s?
1920s, 1930s.
That's awesome.
So Charlatan is the book. I think in some ways, certainly techniques that he was using in a bad way, but I think his focus on what do people really want, and if you can give them what they want, everyone wins.
Yeah, it was John Brinkley. I'll link to it here in the show notes. But I'm familiar with that story because Dan Kennedy had mentioned him. Dan Kennedy's got a book called Making Them Believe, how one of America's legendary rogues, and I can't see the whole title, but basically he was talking about him. So I'm like, why do I know that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you did read it, or are you reading it now?
I read it. I'd heard a podcast episode about it and was thinking, it was pretty entertaining, but reading it was even more entertaining. Yeah. So if you like marketing and PR and persuasion, check out Charlatan, but then don't sell fake medical cures.
Yeah, amen. So what's how do you stay organized?
It helps that I'm naturally organized. I used to be a project manager, so a lot of organization and having tools and so on comes naturally. But I have people to help me stay organized. I help my clients stay organized. I've got my own team. So I have a virtual assistant. I have a couple people helping with marketing. I have my own coach. I coach many of my clients, but you can't coach yourself. You don't have a perspective on yourself. So I have my own coach. I use Trello as a project management system. That's certainly not perfect for larger teams, but it works for my primary team. Right. So that helps. I use Boomerang as an email tool. So if I send an email and I haven't heard back, it'll bring it back. Or, if I say, let's talk again in 2 months, well, it comes back in 2 months. I've recently started using a new CRM called Streak, which is built into Gmail. So excited to see how that goes. And then for marketing automation, I've been using MailChimp for email marketing, and they have some automation features. And one of my plans for this year is to switch to full marketing automation.
Hey, I know a guy that might be able to help you with that.
You don't say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let me put this into Boomerang. I need to follow up soon.
There we go.
How do you prevent slumps? How do you maintain that consistent upward and to the right growth?
Short term, that's not always possible. I do a lot of public speaking, for instance, and sometimes I'll pitch a conference and get a rejection. That's no fun, right? Especially when you have something to share, and ideally you're getting in front of prospective clients. So I think short term it helps just to talk it through with friends, family, team members, and then regroup. I had a talk that I did in 2015 that produced a significant amount of revenue. I had pitched to present again in 2016, and several months before the conference, I got the rejection note. And I was surprised. I thought I had built relationships. I thought it was going to go differently. And initially it was like, what do I do? How am I supposed to recover from this? And instead, I then worked with my team, built a strategy to replace that revenue rather than being dependent on that particular source. And it worked. I actually replaced that revenue plus an additional 10%. And in retrospect, that was a case where if I had gotten picked again to speak at that event, I wouldn't have built that diversification into my revenue. I have diversification between clients, but as a source of leads, that ultimately worked out for the best. Mm-hmm. I also do a tool that I've developed called an advanced retrospective, and I talk about this on my website. Basically, it's writing about the future as if it's already happened. Mm-hmm. I'll do these with clients, so every year, writing about what things will look like a year from then. Today is December 31st, 2000 such and such. It's a great day because, and they talk about that. I'm actually writing an advanced retrospective for, I was thinking, I'm looking a year or 5 years out. I'm in the midst of writing an advanced retrospective for my 90th birthday.
Wow.
I just turned 35, so I am looking pretty far out into the distance. But I think as I speak with people who a lot of who are older, have perspective on things, I think that provides a different perspective, and I think appreciating where things are headed. Let's look at where do I want to go and look back.
Yeah, very cool. So counting high school and college and post-college, I mean, you've been in business for a good 20 years, and even working in the family business, you've been in business 30 years, right?
Yep.
I mean, how do you see things changing in the next, 5 to 10 versus where it has come from? Certainly, I mean, you have even a better perspective on the online thing than I do. I mean, I was still in the Air Force in the late 90s and really hated computers. And then it's funny, I got into technology in 2000. But I didn't have my own website until, end of 2008, early 2009. So how do you see things shaking out here in the next several years as far as sales and marketing that our listeners could take advantage of?
One of the biggest changes over the past 20 years is around a shift from outbound to inbound. Yep. Blasting ads out and cold calling and things like that. That can work for some products and services, but not most. And certainly, if you want to be providing kind of upmarket services, that won't work. To a shift of more of an inbound approach. I mentioned launching the website and starting the blog as the first marketing step beyond sharing that I was starting my agency consulting business. And, at this point, by consistently blogging, I have over 200 posts on my site.
Okay.
And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't make that a key point. But now people find me. They said, they'll say, I read your article about such and such. I need help with that. Can we talk? And, and there we go. That's a lot easier than cold calling people to try to find people who have the problem that you solve. People raise their hand. I do think a focus toward inbound is going to become increasingly the case, around sharing useful content so people come to you first. I think that'll continue. I do think there are certain fundamentals, though, around thinking about what's in it for them, what's in it for your audience. I don't think that's ever going to change.
Right. So, it's interesting because, I'm a fan of HubSpot. I've been using that now for 2.5 years. And they own the inbound marketing space, but they pay a lot of money for sponsored ads and other ads. So can anybody, is inbound totally possible for anybody, or other than maybe a super small company? Can companies sustain big growth just with inbound?
I think you ultimately need a combination of strategies, and the right combo is going to depend on your business and the people you're trying to reach. But ultimately, I'd say it's a key part. It definitely would not be the only part for most people. Yeah.
So if you weren't in sales or being an entrepreneur now, what would you be doing?
I do have an unusual volunteer activity, and I guess you figure if you do something as a volunteer, then that's a sign that maybe you do it otherwise. My volunteer activity is I volunteer as a bartender on a 1930s railroad car. So it's a car called the Dover Harbor. It's based in Washington, D.C. We go on trips wherever Amtrak goes. It's like something out of an old movie. The beds flip down from the ceiling. We, serve meals on real china. There's a rear platform, rear vestibule, so you can wave at people as you go by. It's really nice creating this experience that most Americans have not seen in 60 or 70 years.
And so is that like just an evening thing? Is it an overnight trip when you make it?
We do day trips and overnight trips. So there's a day trip from D.C. to Williamsburg, Virginia and back. You do breakfast on board, do sightseeing in the middle of the day, and then pick you up for a cocktail hour and dinner on the way back to D.C. So that's a day trip. We also have overnight trips. I did a trip to New Orleans and back last year, or a week and a half from D.C. to Denver and back several years ago. So we have both, and most of the trips are open to the public. You can buy a ticket from the nonprofit that runs the car, the Dover Harbor, and check it out.
And why do you volunteer for that instead of getting paid for that?
Well, one factor is that it is a volunteer-run group, so no one is getting paid in the organization. But I like trains. I like history. I like travel. Meet some interesting people. It's really just a fun experience.
So you better know. You better know. Today is March 27th. Do you know what it is? March 27th?
I apparently not. What is it?
It's National Whiskey Day.
Oh no! Okay. Well, you're going to have to take my volunteer bartender card.
So, what's your favorite drink?
I tend to like drinks that are whiskey and citrus juices. So, blood and sand, penicillin, things like that. What?
I've never heard of those. I drink mine straight with either a splash of water or one little tiny ice cube. So I don't know all those drinks. Those sound kind of interesting.
Yeah, they're good. A little bit of smoky and sweet and other flavors as well. So I don't know. I guess the next time you're out, you can ask, well, if you're making something for someone else, give me just like a little bit of a taste.
Yep.
And then you'll switch back to your as is.
So when you say whiskey, are you talking about bourbon?
So those particular drinks will be a mix. So some are with Scotch, some are with rye, some are with bourbon.
Okay. So
and you really just have to try them all.
So when you're home hanging out on your own, what do you drink?
Sometimes I'll make some of those drinks. I'm currently trying an imperial stout. Actually in bourbon, bourbon barrel aged.
Oh, nice.
From Virginia. So we'll see how that goes. And also, I did a study abroad program in Italy and tried limoncello for the first time. It's basically a lemon infused sweetened vodka. Yeah. And you keep it in the freezer, and it's nice and chilled. It's very refreshing.
I had never had those until January 2016. I was out in Tampa. I do this Frogman swim every year to raise money for the Navy SEAL Foundation, and the event got canceled. So they called it off the night before because of weather. And so my buddy I was staying with, he's still on the team's active duty SEAL, and so his friends came over and his wife, and they are into this, and they had like 5 or 6 different flavors at least.
Wow.
And I think I had 5 or 6 samples of 5 or 6 flavors.
Well, getting your money's worth.
Oh my gosh. They were actually pretty yummy, but I'd never had it before then, but they were into it. Okay, man, final question. You gotta give us a little sneak peek on this down selling, and then we'll link to your site and people can learn more about that. So what's going on with that? Because the power of down selling, while it might not sound attractive to many, strategic down selling can be a great way to build clients' trust and looked at as a partner instead of a salesperson who do anything for a fast commission.
Exactly. So, we focus a lot on upselling, sell people more, and cross-selling them, sell them a related product or service. I think more people should try downselling. Mm-hmm. The idea there is, client is thinking of something. You're like, well, you know what? You should actually go with this one. It's less expensive. It's a better fit for your needs.
Right.
The goal there is, you're not making as much money on the short term, but ultimately you are earning their trust and their long-term business. And this applies B2B. It applies B2C. An example I share on my website was going to the hardware store. I owned a house in New Jersey, and when you own a house, you're at the hardware store or other home improvement place a lot. And I was preparing to re-tile my shower surround, and I was picking up all the equipment, and I had this really fancy metal trowel for spreading the adhesive. And the owner of the store was saying, we were talking a bit about the project, and he said, how often are you expecting to do retiling? And I joked, hopefully this is the only time. And he said, okay. Well, I was getting ready to buy this expensive $15 trowel, and he said, you should get this one instead. It was this kind of cheap-looking $6 plastic trowel. And I had avoided it because it was like, well, I don't know, it looks like it's, you could use it once and that's it. It turned out his point was, if you're only going to use it once, just buy the $6 trowel. Right. Otherwise, to get the more expensive one, you're going to have to clean it, it'll get rusty, you might do this, that. If you never use it again, you just wasted money. Right. Ultimately, he gave up $9 in short-term revenue and ultimately got thousands more over the long term. Yeah. Downselling.
Yeah, very cool. And it makes sense. And, I talk about that even just in sales training. And actually, when the customer hands over the contract or hands over the check or the signed invoice, I'll reach out, and before I take it from them, look them in the eyes and say, are you sure? Are you comfortable with this decision? And because it's not enough to get the sale, right? You got to keep the sale. And you got to deliver. You got to over-deliver. Then you have to endear yourself to them, right, to get that word of mouth. And so making sure the sale sticks is every bit as important, if not more so, than closing the sale. Because sometimes they'll give in to just pressure. Maybe you're just a good salesperson. Maybe you're a pushy salesperson. Maybe you're manipulative. Maybe you don't even know it, right? You're just super persuasive. And they sign and then they regret it. So that downselling is kind of the same thing, just giving them a chance and letting them know that their money is not the only thing that you're focused on. And it's not even the most important thing, right? It's what's in it for them. And so that's some great advice. So, man, where do we send people to learn more about you?
Head to my website. I have all kinds of free resources, over 200 articles, specifically around agency management, a lot of things related to sales. You can get the free ebook that we talked about, the Don't Just Make the Logo Bigger, taking clients from painful to profitable. Go to Sakas and Company, that's SAKASAND, the word company.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, get a free copy of the ebook, and access all kinds of other things. And if you'd like one-on-one help, I'm always glad to chat. Yep, very cool. All right, man. It's been fantastic. Karl Sakas all the way from North Carolina. Thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast. Hey, I'm going to leave that in there. Thanks for coming to the Sales Podcast, man. It's been awesome. Thanks, Wes. Have a great day. You too. So do you want to grow? And do you want great recipes on some good bourbons? Then you know what? You may want to reach out to Karl. Or reach out to me, or reach out to both of us. Who knows? We may be able to help you in different ways. But do check out the notes. I've linked to everything that he talked about. The newsletter sign up, downselling, which I think is a very interesting topic and something I've done for a long time. And it's a great method. It's a great practice to help you grow. But I love just his honesty, his sincerity. Talking about how he made the transition from an employee to a consultant. Why not land your business, your employer, as your first client? As long as you've got a good rapport with them. If they're willing to pay you full-time, why wouldn't they pay you part-time? I've always said
the all-stars, the great ones, never have problem finding work. You know, if the Cleveland Cavaliers were disbanded today and, you know, the NBA just cut one franchise and drew straws and Cleveland had to be cut, disbanded, LeBron James would find another job. So what are you doing to be the best? How does the world know that you're the best? And even if you're an employee right now, you can still thrive at what you do. You know, the old adage, you know, find what you love and, you know, follow your passion. You never work a day of your life. Well, others have said, and I agree, you know, bring your passion to your job and you'll soon love it. And yeah, I do get it. There's some bad employers, some bad jobs out there, but, you know, go look at Mike Rowe and Dirty Jobs, and he's had guys. There's this one guy, and I forget the exact title, but I think it's like the Honey Pot or something like that. But they're out there, you know, servicing septic tanks. You know, he didn't go to college for that. That wasn't his lifelong dream, but he fell into it. Hopefully he didn't fall into the septic tank. But maybe he has. I had to climb into one when I was 8th, 9th grade. We had a septic tank, had to service it, and it was nasty. And I was the youngest one in the family, so guess who got the short end of that stick? But, you know, he fell into it, right? And then nobody else wanted to do it. Nobody would bring their pride to the job. And now the guy's a millionaire servicing septic tanks. I think I've told the story before, but, you know, when I was at Oakwood Homes selling trailers, 1998, 99, I was still in Mobile, Alabama. So it was, you know, probably late 98, early 99. And guy comes up and, you know, he looked like a Bubba. If you're from the South, you know what a Bubba looks like. And you know what? I've seen Bubbas everywhere. I've seen them in New York. I've seen them in California. So Bubbas are everywhere. And one of the guys judged him from inside the store and said, "Yeah, you can take him, Wes." And I got to know the guy, and he didn't service septic tanks. He installed new ones. And so he had a truck, he had a trailer, he had a backhoe, he had one assistant. And that guy, I don't know if he was a millionaire, but his other car was a Mercedes. His wife's hobby was breeding thoroughbred horses. The guy was loaded. And he didn't even service them. He just put in new ones, right? It was basically dig a hole, drop this big concrete thing into the ground, and leave. And he owned the business. He made a killing, and he gave me a ton of referrals. And I gave him a ton of referrals. You know, people I'm selling trailers to, putting them out on their own land out in the South. There's no plumbing. There's no, I guess they'd get city electricity, but it was so expensive to get sewer out there. They would just do a septic tank. So I made a lot of money because of that guy, because I didn't judge him. Okay. And again, I don't know what his passion was in life, but he brought his passion, you know, and an energy to the job, and he did well. So don't judge people, right, by what they do. Don't judge them on their appearance, and thrive where you are, and do all that you can. And then I guarantee you good things will come to you. Just too many people looking for a handout, an easy way out. Don't want to put time in on the mat, right? It's like when I head out to jiu-jitsu, as soon as I hit publish on this, we got to warm up, we got to sweat, got to get loose, got to go through the lesson of the day, and then we get after each other for 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And usually I stay after, although the night class is 2 hours already, so I may not stay. Plus it ends at 8, so got to get home with the family. But sometimes I do. I stay late during the day. When I go at noon, you know, I'll stay extra and get even more in. And so now I'm going 6 days a week, right? But getting an extra 1 or 2 rolls in per session. So it's like I'm going 7 or 8 days, 7 or 8 times in a week. That's how you get good. There's no substitute for putting time in. Okay? So if you're grinding it out right now, rest assured you're not alone. So stick with it. Keep educating yourself, but you have to apply what you learn. Just like in jiu-jitsu, right? We go through a lesson. We drill it. We drill it for probably 30 to 45 minutes. but then we test it. We start doing it live against another opponent who just went through the same class. So they know exactly what you're going to try. So if you can get it done on somebody who's just practiced it themselves, then you're pretty dang good. But going through and even failing, right? Not pulling off that move during that time, during that session, it's not the end of the world. You need to go through that and then figure out how to make it happen. So, do you love it enough to do it poorly until you do it well? I hope you do. Hey, thanks for listening. Please leave a review. You'd be surprised how few people do this. Go to iTunes, go to Google. Just say a few kind words, would you? Share this with your friends and family, your coworkers. Let me know you're listening on my fan page, on Twitter. Let's have a dialogue. If you have a question, if you have a guest you'd like me to have on, introduce me or just give a shout out. I'll track them down and we'll make it happen. All right? So thanks for listening. As always, remember to sell different.